I still remember the way the tires hummed against the pavement, a steady, comforting sound that belonged only to early mornings. It was 1953, and the world was still waking up from the long night of war. Men were back at work, women hung laundry in neat white rows, and kids like me were trying to figure out what kind of country we'd inherited. My name was Tommy, and that summer, turned 14, old enough, according to my father, to start earning your own air. He said it half jokingly, but in our house that meant something. Everyone worked, everyone helped. So when Mr. Dawson, the milkman, said he needed someone to cover the far side of town, the streets too narrow for his truck, I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. That's how I got my first route. Each dawn, I'd be up before the sun, pedaling through the quiet streets with the heavy crate balanced on the front of my old blue Schwinn. The bottles clinked softly with every bump, and the air smelled of dew, wet grass, and a little bit of gasoline from the trucks warming up on Main Street. At first, I thought it was just a job: ride fast, deliver milk, get paid. But something changed along the way. Somewhere between the houses and the soft sound of screen doors opening, it stopped being just about bottles. It became about people. Mrs. Keller on Oak Street, who always left me a note with a smiley face drawn in the corner. She'd lost her husband in Europe, but never stopped baking cookies for the neighborhood kids. Or old Mr. Perkins, who'd wait by the porch every morning just to say, "You're running smooth today, son," like it meant something. It did. Those moments were small, but they built something inside me, a sense that every ride, every stop, was a thread in the bigger fabric of our town. By 7 o'clock, the streets would start to come alive. Engines coughed, radios played softly from kitchen windows, and the smell of bacon mixed with newspaper ink drifted through the air. I'd pass other delivery boys' papers, bread, sometimes even ice, and we'd wave without slowing down. Everyone had their part to play in keeping things moving. There was one house at the edge of Elm Street, though, that stood out from the rest. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling, and the porch sagged just enough to make it look tired. I never saw anyone there, but every morning, 2 empty bottles sat neatly on the step. I'd replace them, tuck the invoice under the rubber band, and move on. One morning, curiosity got the better of me. I knocked. Nothing. Just the faint smell of dust and something sweet, maybe lilacs. As I turned to leave, I noticed the faint movement of a curtain upstairs. Someone was watching. After that, I made sure the bottles were spotless, the caps tight, the labels straight. It felt like a promise to someone I didn't know. Weeks passed, then months. The summer heat gave way to the crisp air of fall. My legs grew stronger, my roots longer, and the world felt wider than it ever had before. I didn't know it then, but those rides were teaching me things no classroom ever could: about patience, about noticing the quiet corners of people's lives, about pride in doing something right even when no one sees. One Saturday morning, as I rolled back into the dairy to return the empties, Mr. Dawson handed me a few extra coins and said, "You've been making a difference out there, kid. Got a note from one of your customers." He slid a small piece of paper across the counter. The handwriting was shaky but careful. "Please tell the boy with the blue bicycle thank you. He never missed a day, not even in the rain." That means more than he'll ever know. No name, no address, just that. I folded it up and tucked it in my pocket, feeling a strange kind of warmth that no paycheck could match. That evening, when I got home, Father asked how work went. "Good," I said. He nodded and went back to his newspaper. But something in me had shifted. For the first time, I understood what he meant by earning your own air. It wasn't about money. It was about mattering, even in the smallest ways. And every morning after that, when I swung my leg over the bike and the bottles began to clink, I rode not just for milk, but for everyone. The autumn of 1953 came colder than most folks expected. The mornings smelled of rain and wood smoke, and the sky hung low and gray, like it hadn't quite woken up yet. I'd started wearing my father's old jacket, the one with the patched elbows, though the sleeves were too long and made my hands disappear when I gripped the handlebars. The milk route didn't stop for weather. Mr. Dawson always said, "Babies still need milk when it rains." So I rode through drizzle and wind, my shoes squeaking by the time I reached Elm Street. There was something about those mornings, the quiet, the way the wheels hissed over wet pavement, that made me think more than usual. The houses all seemed smaller under the gray sky, and the world slower. People nodded from behind fogged-up windows, cups of coffee in hand, and I'd think how strange it was that I saw their mornings before anyone else did. Then one Friday, the storm came. The sky broke open before dawn. Wind, rain, lightning that lit up the whole town for a second and then left everything darker than before. The smart thing would have been to stay home, but that wasn't how things worked. Mr. Dawson's truck was stuck near the bridge, and east route, my route, still needed to be done. I hesitated at first, standing by the door with my raincoat half buttoned, my mother asking if I'd lost my mind. But then, thought of the old man on Maple Avenue who lived alone, and Mrs. Keller with her morning coffee, and those bottles waiting on the porch of the empty house at the edge of Elm Street. So I went. The rain was like a curtain, thick and endless. My cap kept sliding down over my eyes, and by the time I reached Main Street, the crate on my bike felt twice as heavy. I stopped at each porch, wiping the bottles clean before setting them down, as if anyone would even notice. But I couldn't leave them dirty, it didn't feel right. When I got to Elm Street, the wind nearly knocked me sideways. The old house looked even lonelier in the storm. No lights, no sound, just rain pouring off the gutters like a waterfall. I left the bottles, held down the note with the rock, and turned to go. That's when I saw it, the faint flicker of light behind the upstairs curtain. For the first time, I heard a voice, weak but clear. Wait! I froze. A thin figure appeared at the door, a woman, pale and wrapped in a blanket. She looked too old to stand there in the wind, but she smiled. "You've been bringing me milk all this time," she said softly. "I thought maybe you'd stop today." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, water dripping from my cap. She opened the door wider, just enough for the warm air from inside to touch my face. It smelled like bread, and something else, lavender maybe. "Thank you," she said, and then closed the door again. That was it. No big story, no reward, just a thank you in the rain. But for some reason, that short moment stuck with me more than anything else that year. When I got back to the dairy, soaked through and shivering, Mr. Dawson handed me a towel and a grin. "You're either the most reliable kid in town," he said, "or the most foolish." I laughed, but deep down, I felt something different, a kind of pride that didn't need words. Because I realized that morning that people like her, quiet, forgotten people, depended on someone showing up, even when the world didn't make it easy. As winter came, the roads grew icy and my fingers stiff, but I never missed a day. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in a shop window, skinny kid on a bike, hair plastered down from the rain, and think how small I looked compared to everything around me. But then I'd remember the faces, the nods, the thank yous. They made me feel taller somehow. The day before Christmas, Mr. Dawson gathered all of us delivery boys in the dairy yard. He handed out small brown envelopes, bonuses, he called them. Inside mine was a folded note instead of cash. "To the boy on the blue bicycle from the lady on Elm Street, the milk helps, but your kindness helps more." No signature, no name. I looked up at the snow falling softly over the streetlights and felt something I hadn't before, not just pride, but belonging. Like I was part of something invisible but real. The next morning, the house on Elm Street was dark again. No bottles waited on the porch. I stopped anyway, just to look for a moment. Then I pedaled on, through the snow and the silence, thinking how some people leave the world quietly, but not without leaving something behind. I never forgot her face, and I never stopped writing. By the summer of '56, I wasn't a boy anymore. My voice had deepened, my bike had a new coat of paint, and I could carry twice as many bottles without wobbling. The war had been over for a decade, and America was moving faster than ever. Cars filled the streets, shiny and loud, and the first televisions flickered in living room windows, turning the evenings blue. Milk trucks were getting bigger, two shiny white Studebakers with coolers in the back and cheerful logos on the doors. Mr. Dawson said it was progress, but I noticed how the old bicycle routes grew quieter each week. Still, kept riding mine. There were places those trucks couldn't reach, narrow lanes, backyards, the houses too far off the paved road. That's where I belong. Each morning, it started before sunrise, the air cool and sweet. I liked the rhythm of it, the steady turn of the pedals, the click of bottles, the sleepy town waking one window at a time. The same streets, the same houses, but the people inside kept changing. Babies became schoolchildren, young couples grew gray, and I kept bringing them milk, day after day, like a quiet thread weaving through their lives. Sometimes, folks would stop me just to talk. "Tommy," Mrs. Keller would say, standing in her doorway, "you're taller every year. Pretty soon, you'll be too grown up for that bike." I'd laugh, promise her I'd never quit, and then pedal off before she could see the way her words lingered. Because she wasn't wrong. The truth was, I'd started thinking about leaving, maybe going to the city, learning mechanics, or working in one of the new factories springing up near the river. But every time I thought about it, something held me back, not duty exactly, but something softer. Maybe habit, maybe care, maybe both. One afternoon, near the end of August, I stopped at the small white house at the edge of town new family had moved in. The man was a war veteran, his right hand still wrapped in a brace. His wife waved from the porch, and a little girl peeked out behind her. When I set the milk down, the girl stepped forward and asked, "Do you ever get tired of riding?" I smiled. "Sometimes, but the tired goes away. The feeling of doing something right that stays longer." He thought about that for a second, then said, "I want to do something right too." And there it was, that simple exchange that made all the effort worth it. The bike, the rain, the cold mornings, they weren't about milk anymore. They were about connection. About showing up when the world didn't expect much from you. That fall, Mr. Dawson told me he'd be selling the dairy. His son wanted to take over and modernize the operation. He said it kindly, but I could see the change written all over it: new machines, new routes, no room for old ways. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've done good work, Tommy, real good. But it's time to think bigger." That night, I rode the long way home through every street I'd ever served, past porches and mailboxes and windows that had watched me grow up. I knew he was right, but the thought of not riding felt like cutting something loose inside me. When I reached Elm Street, the old house still stood there, quieter now, boarded windows, vines crawling up the sides. I stopped anyway, resting one hand on the gate. For a moment, I could almost see the faint light in the upstairs window again. I pulled the old note from my wallet, the one I'd carried since that stormy morning years ago. The paper was soft and creased, the ink fading. "You never missed a day, not even in the rain. That means more than you'll ever know." I read it once, folded it back, and smiled. The next morning, I delivered my last crate. The streets were slick from the night's dew. The air smelled like apples and gasoline, and I rode slower than usual, taking in every turn, every house, every bit of the town that had been my world. When I rolled up to the dairy for the final time, Mr. Dawson was waiting. He didn't say much, just shook my hand and said, "You'll do fine, son. Wherever you go." I nodded, but as I looked around the trucks lined up, the workers loading bottles into crates, I realized something. I hadn't just been delivering milk. I'd been delivering mornings, small pieces of peace that people could count on. And maybe, in a world that was changing so fast, that was worth something. Years later, when I finally did leave for the city, kept the bike. It sat in my father's shed for decades, tires flat, paint chipped, dust on the handlebars. But every time I went home, I'd touch it, run my fingers along the frame, and remember the sound of bottles clinking at dawn. You never forget the things that taught you who you are. It had been more than 40 years since I last rode down Main Street with the crate of milk on the front of my bike. The town looked different now, brighter, busier, louder. But underneath the noise, I could still hear it, the soft hum of tires on pavement, the faint clink of bottles in rhythm with a boy's breath. I came back one summer morning, gray-haired and slower, to settle my father's old house. The paint had peeled, the oak tree in the yard was half gone, and the porch boards groaned when I stepped on them, but it still smelled the same. Dust, pine soap, and something like memory. The new postman waved when he saw me. "You must be Mr. Walker's son," he said. "He used to talk about you. Said you were the boy with the bicycle." I smiled. I hadn't heard anyone call me that in decades. After sorting through the house, I walked into town. Most of the old stores were gone. The hardware shop was a diner now, and the barber's pole didn't spin anymore. But the air carried the same rhythm, the same hum of life going about its business. When I reached the old dairy, I stopped short. The building was still there, repainted, rebranded, but standing. The sign over the door read, "Dawson's Creamery since 1923. I went inside. The place smelled of sugar and vanilla. Now, they'd turned it into an ice cream shop. Kids laughed around small tables, and behind the counter, a woman in her 50s wiped her hands on a towel and looked at me curiously. "Can I help you?" she asked. I hesitated. "I used to work here," I said. "Long time ago. Milk deliveries. For Mr. Dawson." Her eyes softened. "My father used to talk about those days. Said there was a boy who never missed a morning, even when the bridge flooded." I chuckled. "That sounds like me." She reached under the counter and pulled out a small, framed photograph. And it was a black and white image of the dairy yard, men loading crates, the old trucks lined up, and a skinny boy on a bicycle, smiling just shy of the camera. "There were stories about you," she said. "My dad said people called you the boy who rode for everyone." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and I felt that same warmth I'd known as a kid, hearing the bottles clink together in the morning. I ordered a vanilla cone, sat by the window, and watched the streetcars, strollers, sunlight flickering off glass. It was a different world, but somewhere under it all, the same quiet kindness still moved. Later that afternoon, I took a walk to Elm Street. The old houses were nearly gone, only two still stood, patched and leaning. And then I saw it, the one I used to stop at every morning, the house with the upstairs curtain and the quiet figure behind it. It was smaller than I remembered. The porch was gone, the steps crooked, the windows boarded. But there was something about it, something that still held a whisper of life. I stood there for a long time. Then, from across the street, an elderly woman watering her flowers called out, "You looking for someone?" I nodded toward the house. "Used to deliver milk here. Long time ago. There was a lady who lived there. Kind woman," she smiled gently. "My mother. She used to talk about you." Turned to face her. She was old now, hair silver, hands trembling slightly. But her eyes were the same shade of blue I remembered through that window all those years ago. She said, the woman continued, that you reminded her the world was still good. Said some mornings, you were the only person she saw. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded and looked back at the house. Before I left, she went inside and returned with a folded note, yellowed, fragile. "Mama kept this in her Bible," she said. "I think it's yours." I opened it carefully. "To the boy on the blue bicycle, your kindness made the mornings brighter. Thank you for never forgetting us." I folded it back and smiled, my eyes stinging just enough to blur the world for a moment. That night, I walked down to the river, the same path I used to take when I was 14 and full of plans. The air smelled like rain again, and for a second, I could almost hear the old milk bottles clinking softly in the dark, the sound of a life beginning. You never really stop writing, I thought. You just find new roads. When I got home, I placed the note beside my father's watch on the mantel, both reminders of time well spent. And the next morning, when the first light came through the window, I whispered, half to myself, half to the past, still writing, "Ma'am, always will be." Some stories aren't about grand gestures, they're about showing up, every day, with kindness that no one expects. If this story reminded you of someone from your own past, let us know in the comments below. And if you believe small acts still matter, leave a like, share this video, and subscribe. Because here, we remember the quiet heroes who made ordinary days unforgettable.